we wanted to use this time basically as a Q&A for you guys, right? So last few sessions, we talked about some great topics, had some really good conversations. And we wanted to use this session for you guys to kind of take the floor and ask the questions you have and get help with any marketing challenges you have, any questions, or even just anything you're curious about, right? Wanted to just have a fun discussion today and kind of keep it light and casual. And hopefully we can solve some problems for you guys too. So yeah, figure we could dive right in. Interested to kind of let you guys take the floor. What questions do you guys have? What things are you guys curious about? Or what challenges do you have you're struggling with that we could help you guys out with?
I would really like a cash register that's just filled up with money, right? And that just like keeps autofilling itself back up.
Yeah.
Can you help with that?
We're working on that. It's on the roadmap.
All right. Anybody?
Trying to think. I was unprepared because I missed your last session. So I'm just thinking. I'm sure
the last one too.
Yeah, no worries at all. Shara, I know you were on the last one. I know you guys did a really cool session about, I think it was the differences between marketing and growth. And Ryan had a really cool map, I think you dug a lot, right?
Yeah, it was a really great map and what was really interesting is breaking down the channels, like organizing the channels by the different phases. So whether the person is in the suffering phase or the contentment phase, being able to understand how the different channels help the individuals that are in those channels is really helpful, because it helps you to kind of understand the mindset of the customer, but also it was just a really good organization tool. So I really appreciate it. Just the organization piece of it. And it was really helpful. It wasn't just helpful from a marketing perspective, but just like a life perspective.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, it was super helpful. So if you don't have a chance to see the recording, please do see it, because it was very helpful for me.
Yeah, I'll drop that in the chat for you guys. You guys can pull it up after we hop off here. But yeah, no, I heard really good feedback about that session, and it's really useful to have frameworks, right? Because there's so many different things in marketing and so many different noises and so many different ways to tackle it. But when you have a framework that kind of speaks to like the challenge and allows you to address like that marketing journey at each of those different stages, then it gives you something to glom onto and gives you focus, right? So I love that Ryan presented that last time. I'm glad you guys got value out of that.
I have a question. It's a little bit different, but we used to use lead scoring a long time ago, and I loved that because especially in the part of the question for what we do is for our digital transformation practice, so the sales cycle can be a little bit longer. And so at some point the lead scoring went away, and I've been fighting to get it back. And so we're finally getting close to testing out a couple of things, but I didn't know if there's anything, and it might be like a resource you guys have. And I know when we worked with you a long time ago, we leaned on you for this, but is there any, I guess, is it a standard or I don't know, any tips you guys have for lead scoring? Or like I've read stuff online, but you can have a score that's like 500, but then like, is there a framework where you should keep it, like I'm struggling to find something that makes sense for, I guess we can call it a technology consulting aspect, and like what activities maybe don't matter. Like if it's the wrong title that registered for a webinar, do you ding that? And I don't know, that might be a bigger can of worms here, but.
Yeah, not that big of a can of worms. Jared, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I'll take
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just take a crack at it. I mean, I think ultimately, and this is certainly true whether you're in a technology services industry or otherwise, you want to score your leads based on the ultimate revenue value. I always like to begin with that end in mind, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about like, what is the likelihood that this is actually going to turn into closed won revenue for the business, and what is the value of that? You can kind of work backwards from there, right? And you can kind of look at all the actions that people in your database can take and then say, okay, historically, based on our historical data, when people with these titles take these actions, what is the likelihood of them actually becoming, an opportunity and ultimately, close won revenue? And you can go pretty high level with that. It's easy to kind of get in the weeds and go super in depth, but if you can find some general trends that you can tie back to, then you can say it's a relative score of 100, where 100 is, this is, the best possible lead, and everything below that is kind of adding up to it. You can start to kind of understand the relative weight of different actions in your funnel, right? Another thing that can be very helpful is looking at the Google Analytics side of things and starting to assign some relative values of different conversion actions, right? So that someone filling out your form, maybe that's like 100 and the title's on point, right? Whereas someone filling out an ebook, maybe that's like a 1, because maybe 1 in the 100 will actually become a qualified opportunity, right? So that can also be useful to start to understand the value of the different conversion actions that are coming in, so you can kind of map your lead scoring around that as well. But yeah, I'd say ultimately, like, understanding those core kind of personas and who they are that map to revenue, and then kind of working back from that, can give you a nice high-level framework to sort of build off of. That's relatively simple. Because the other risk is you get too complex and you're in the weeds, and that can be a challenge to manage. Chris, did you have anything to add to that, or any color?
So I was just thinking funnel math, basically, which is what you described. And I have this document, Jared, that like may be useful as a visual here, because it can get a little bit ambiguous when you're just talking about stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Not you particularly, like when
Yeah.
anybody talks about stuff, it can be a little ambiguous, but I think like the funnel math slides from the training robots talk, the how we train robots, would be useful. But Jared got it exactly right. Basically, like, and it's difficult in high ticket B2B because like there's not that many deals closing. But imagine for a second that you're like a B2C where there's a lot of transactions taking place. Like say if you're e-commerce, there's transactions taking place all the time. So you can quantify like what's the average transaction value. And then you can go one step back behind that. Okay, so a transaction value is 100. Well, how many add to carts did it take to generate that? So you can basically go, and Jared, I don't know if you want to share it on your screen, or if you can share it on your screen.
Absolutely.
But you basically can write it all out and approximate those values in your case. But I would definitely base it on real life revenue values. And like if you can get the actual deal value, like in a perfect world, you would link in with your CRM, and then the deal values would populate dynamically based on whatever the deal value is in CRM. But that's just like a perfect state, like you can definitely get close to it by doing some pretty simple math like this.
Yeah. Can you guys see my screen all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So this is, and a lot of this material is straight from Google. So this is kind of the future of where Google Ads and sort of the Google platform is headed. They call it the lead to sale journey, right? Where the idea is you have these leads, right, that you start with, and then they progress through a journey after they hit that lead stage, right? So 4,000 leads, maybe 5% convert to what you would call marketing qualified lead, right? And then of those, maybe half of them become a sales qualified lead. And then maybe 25% of your SQLs become a closed deal, right? And each of these stages take a certain amount of time, right? Well, what you want to then do is feed these different signals back to Google or back to Facebook. LinkedIn's getting there. That's not quite there yet. To inform them, hey, we got this lead, but this lead became an MQL, or this lead's even better because it became an SQL. So this is a much higher value than just the lead, right? And ultimately, as you start to build that sort of data set, you can train Google or Facebook or whatever platform to optimize for those further down the funnel conversions, not just for the superficial form fill, right? That's kind of the goal.
So let me ask you this though, Sasha, I'll toss one back at you. So we focus a lot on this for the purpose of ad campaigns, like paid ad campaigns, and training the algorithms to find better and better customers. But what is your use case for lead scoring? Like, why do you like it?
Mine,
do you use it?
We have so many leads stuck in like middle of the funnel. And what happens is like we have a ton of content. I wouldn't say a ton, but strategic, good content, plenty of content. And then even webinars. And I feel like we do these things and it kind of is a bigger, not issue, but conversation where of course our sales team is involved, but I feel like there's just hundreds of people sitting stuck in that middle where I don't know if maybe these 100 are like, hey guys, sales team, take it. You guys need to run with these because they're so active. So that's what I'm trying to clean up is I know people are doing things. I know they're paying attention. I know they're downloading, attending, viewing. And I'd love to know if they participate like in any of our ad campaigns too, if they filter in there. So that's kind of, does that make sense? That's where I'm hoping it pull out those that are hotter or closer to on their path to the closing of their buyer's journey.
Got it. And is there an agreement, like an internal agreement between you and sales that says like, send us a lead once XYZ happens? Or is that what you're looking to?
That's what
define?
we have. Yeah, it's like all over the place. Like now, like some guides or content that we have that we're putting more attention to because it's important or it's a hot topic. We have like instant MQL alerts, but for the things that is not necessarily an active campaign, but things are going on all the time, we don't have that set right now. I kind of do my own, like, where people help me almost like mine some data just to see if anything stands out. So it's been pretty inefficient. I think we're just missing a lot of potentially good opportunities, at least for conversations.
Yeah. So I think the key for you, and maybe you do this with the sales team, is like making a decision. You know, even without the funnel math or even without anything, just kind of logically ask yourself, like, when would it make sense to send, you know, a deal to the sales team? And like, let's just say that the answer to that is, you know, if they have attended any of these 6 webinars, for instance, like they're definitely going to sales. So you can have just one rule, or you could have a series of a couple different rules. But I think in the very short term, just like defining what that trigger is pretty clearly, and then making sure that the leads, you know, get over to the sales team accordingly. And you'll probably want to include the sales team, right? Because they'll have an opinion on when they ought to, you know, be introduced.
Yep.
But then that kind of solves your short term, because the short term expensive problem that you have is that, you know, there's basically money sitting in the CRM that none of the salespeople are paying attention to. So I would like solve that in a short term, even if you have to do it like somewhat manually a little bit, just to simply get those names in, or just to simply get those names over.
Yep.
Because this is, and so like in a perfect world, you would like to have a system set up so that, you know, no matter the campaigns you're doing, as folks are coming in, they're being scored and routed appropriately. But currently you have like a buildup, which is what is it? It's not going to be that's not going to be the case forever. You know, like you have like just like this large buildup. But one thing you might want to consider doing is like any leads that fall into the category of like has done something nobody has ever called them type of thing. You might send an email out to that cohort of leads with an offer, with like a commercially oriented, like specific, like not a white paper, but like, you know, let's sit down for a sales meeting, for instance. And then look at the engagement on that email and consider anybody that, like, for instance, like opens the email and clicks on a link within it to be like potentially sales ready.
Yep. Yeah, we do that now where I take like, if I know, like I said, it was like a hotter campaign or something that we're really trying to drum up sales for, I will run like looking at emails, like who engaged, you know, and pull those clicks out just to give them something, because it seems like it would make sense. But yeah, no, all that is good stuff. And I love what you said about obviously short term. I think that's great. So thank you. Then the funnel math, I think that's awesome too. I didn't think, I don't know, there's just so much to consider, but that's very helpful.
So one thing that I like to do is I haven't come up with a good name for it yet, but think of it like a honeypot, like some element on your site, say a certain link, right, or a certain CTA that somebody would only click on it if they're qualified, right? So for instance, like say that you had like an RFP center on the website, right? Like if somebody clicks on that RFP center site, like they're commercially oriented most likely. So you could have one or several honeypot mechanisms, or I'm trying to come up with a better name for it, but I call them sometimes IOIs and IOQs, like indicators of intent and indicators of quality. So for instance, like you might say, okay, what do all these leads have in common? They fill out a form at some point. And what do all the forms have in common is that they have a thank you page after that form. So that's really useful real estate, and it's a great place to put your what do you call it? Dang, my words are not coming to me today. But the highly like commercially oriented message. And so like for every 100 people that download it, you know, maybe only 10 of them will click on like whatever that contrasting message is, such as, you know, sit down with our sales team, they might say. So if anybody clicks that, whether they fill out the form or complete the, you know, or actually schedule the demo or not, they're probably interested in buying something.
Yep. That's a great point. And another couple ideas I'll just throw out there that require different levels of effort to test. One is, you know, if they're not ready for your services yet, they may still be interested in information that could lead up to services, right? So one thing you could consider as an interstitial step is offering some kind of informational product, whether it be a white paper or a report that the prospect could pay a nominal fee for, that would, you know, lead down the path of where they've already been going in terms of their informational interest, right? So this creates like a small sort of next step for them to actually engage financially with your company, and shows that there's buying intent, right? That they're willing to give even a little bit of money, relatively speaking, to learn about the topic. That can be very helpful, because along with that purchase, you can offer a consultation with an expert on your team, which of course is a discovery call, right? So that can be one way to kind of engage folks who might be ready to buy something, but aren't quite at the stage or at a level of awareness of need where they're ready to have that sales conversation yet. What was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, so that's one thing I would say is basically how can you like create a small step that could lead to a bigger step down the road. The other thing that is really useful is if you can create an experience on your website that's almost like a informational quiz of sorts with some logic behind it, for that person who might be in that situation where they're not sure what solution they need. But you can ask them a series of questions, and if they're already in your CRM, you know, you can track this, whether it's in HubSpot or what have you, to see like what are they clicking on, what are they engaging with, how are they responding to this quiz, right? And you know, the answers to that quiz could inform like, hey, based on what you're telling us, you actually need this, right? So it could be that some of those leads, they might be potentially ready to buy, they just don't know what the next step is yet, right? So that could be another opportunity, is kind of creating that interstitial kind of middle funnel conversion point, to help that person get answers to see which path they need to take forward, whether that's hiring your company or otherwise.
Yeah. You know what I just thought of, like a kind of a cool element to like embed in line on your service pages. Like if you could have a short code that just drops this little element in, but like, will you hire us or a company like us in the next 6 months? Yes, no, maybe. Could you imagine that? That's just like right in the middle of and no emails required, right?
Yep.
So people are going to interact with that. And then that's like if they click yes, like boom, get that person to sales immediately, you know?
Yep.
That'd be kind of, I think we should kind of try that on our own site.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Like yes, no, maybe. You going to hire someone or not? It's like, are you in market or not?
That's the second one.
Yep.
But that's a good one, Sasha. We got the engine. You warmed up my engine. I like it.
Thank you. That was awesome. Great stuff.
Cool. What other questions do you guys have, or things you're either grappling with right now, or just interested in, or want to learn more about? We've got our ears to the floor of a lot that's going on in digital marketing otherwise, so do not be shy.
Yeah. I have one, Jared, and that maybe you can just provide a little color on. Been working a lot in GA4 lately, and it just seems like it is, as kind of the heir apparent to universal analytics,
Yep.
always good to start moving over. It kind of feels like very half baked, and I'm trying to figure out like whether I need to shift my mindset around how I'm thinking about analytics because, having full disclosure for everyone else on the call, I am a web mechanics alumni. So, great education in Google Analytics and analytics in general, from my time with you guys. And I'm just trying to figure out like, is my mindset in the like do I need to adjust my mindset to like adjust to GA4's new interface and modeling, or am I like rightfully thinking that like it's just kind of not quite ready for prime time and being super valuable, both in terms of like how it collects and surfaces data as well as just like some of the features that haven't quite been moved over yet. Do you guys have a perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can speak to kind of where web mechanics is at with that, transparently. So Derek, who, he's our head of development. He's deep in the weeds investigating GA4. He's our analytics guru, wizard, et cetera. And he's adopted a cohort from our team to basically, look at different cases for our clients to see what the use cases are. Right? So where we're at with our evaluation is definitely not ready for prime time yet. As I'm sure you've noticed, a lot of features missing. Obviously, they're changing a lot of the language around, what they call acquisition and conversion and all that different stuff. So how they're framing, the platform is changing. But there's a lot of basic elements missing too, right? So I would say this is the time to start experimenting with GA4. Start playing around, plugging in with the different features. And what I really spend time looking for is like, what are the new things you can do with GA4 that you couldn't do in Google Analytics, right? Operating under the assumption that eventually, a lot of the features that are needed for GA4 to go live, for the majority of people that use Google Analytics, are going to be there eventually. And I would use this time to really experiment with, the GA4 and learn like, what are the cool new things I can do that I couldn't do before, right? And really dig into those so that when, GA4 is finally ready for adoption by the mainstream, you'll be there not just with like the prior knowledge of the prior Google Analytics platform, but with it, you'll be doing the new stuff already that, other people maybe don't know about. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're kind of looking for those new areas of opportunity with the understanding that, there are limitations to GA4 right now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's validating. I appreciate that.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there too. I don't really have a lot of other color to add, but I know that Derek Cav has very much been in the weeds of it, EJ. So like, if you want to grab a chat with him, I'm sure he'd be down to catch up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've been just to plug you guys one more time. Your attributor script that he keeps publicly available on GitHub was able to take that and implement that in one of my prior roles, and it was really just a killer, very popular addition for the team, for the client that I was working on, and Derek is just a genius. So
that's awesome.
I reached out to him specifically thanking him, just saying, hey, like I have this. It was a very niche, like education focused CRM that they were using. So it wasn't like the traditional setup. So I had to modify it a little bit, but reached out to him a couple weeks ago. And I will make sure to close loop again with him on GA4.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did not even know that he published a attributor script. That's how Derek is. He just builds stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are suggesting or advising clients that they at least install GA4 because it is inevitable that it might get pushed back again, like the cookieless future. I don't think that they'll make it mandatory if it's still half baked. I can tell that they're working hard to bake it out. Like I'm on the analytics newsletter, and they all sound really good in theory. It's like, wow, there's this new machine learning capabilities and this and that, but we're yet to see it being really all that useful. However, the learning, like the machine learning capabilities that are apparently baked into it are what we're most excited about, which is why we like to get it installed and maybe even set up like some of the most basic event or conversion tracking just so that you can have the data flowing in.
Yep.
I think that's probably the primary value for it right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But yeah, me personally, like anytime I'm going to check analytics, I still go to Universal.
Yep.
I have a question. So are there any, I guess, if you had to give someone, I guess, more resources to follow or networks to be part of, or tools to use just to kind of, again, stay on track of marketing trends, kind of changes in marketing, could you provide kind of like your top 5 of places that you go to kind of stay on track or to just stay up to date kind of with marketing trends, what's going on, things like that?
That's a really good question. You know, and I think it speaks to the conversation we were having earlier. And there's so much going on in marketing. So how do you focus your attention, right? You know, I think there's a couple things. You know, obviously, you know, for me, like I'm always researching the digital marketing space because that's the space I'm in. So I think having like some pulse in your industry in general and like what people are doing, both marketing wise, but just the industry in general is certainly useful. But I'll be honest, like a lot of what I learn from digital marketing, I learn just by following folks on LinkedIn, right? You know, for example, for demand gen, one company I like to follow is Metadata. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of really innovative stuff with B2B demand gen marketing. And they're just super smart in general, right? I like to follow what they're doing and their whole kind of ecosystem, right? One thing that's not always discussed is communities. So there are a lot of marketing communities out there that some of which do have a fee, but they're kind of a safe space, if you will, for marketers to talk to each other and get feedback and insight. And you learn a ton, right? One that's super cheap and super easy to get into is Dave Gerhardt. He was the former chief brand officer at Drift. He also headed up CMO at Privy. And now he's basically doing his own thing for his brand. Has this group called DGMG. So Dave Gerhardt Marketing Group, DGMG. It's $10 a month to get in. And the conversations there are fantastic. EJ, I know you're in that. I see you up in there. You know, just really super smart people. And if you search those threads, you'll find answers to a ton of questions that you probably already been answered there, right? There are also some more premium communities worth checking out. Peak Community is one, PEAK. That one was founded by the CEO of Terminus. And that's a really good one for like career growth. And also networking with kind of, you know, more sort of higher up the C-suite. And then Pavilion is another big one. And that one I know is pretty expensive, but you know, it's a pretty strong community, especially if you're looking for sort of revenue focused marketers and sort of leaders. Chris, would you add anything to that?
Well, I think I'm the wrong person to ask. But what I think is really good is having a reading habit. So I'm a huge reader. Jared is too. I totally believe that readers are leaders. And ever since I was a kid, I remember, and especially when the internet came out, I was just like, oh my goodness, all of this information is just there for free. Like what? And I just wanted to sit down and read all day. So I think that's the important thing, is having a reading and a learning habit, which is part of our culture here at Web Mechanics. But even still, we reinforce it. Like one of our quarterly rocks for the sales and marketing group is a reading and a writing habit, right? So we do it collectively as a group. Everybody shares their, you know, links on the spreadsheet. It's great conversation points, great learning, great jump off. But especially if you're managing a team, it's a good practice, you know, just to keep everybody in the discipline of being out there reading and learning. In terms of what I actually read, like I certainly have some go-to items, but mostly because I'm a practitioner, like I spend a lot of time just like in the weeds, like getting punched in the nose and having to figure stuff out. So usually my go-to thing is just Google. Like anytime I need to figure something out, I just Google it. I bring up, you know, a few articles. I'm very, very good at Googling, like stupid good. Like I can, if it exists in Google's index, like I can query it out of there.
Yeah.
So I would look for like advanced search operators. There's a list of advanced search operators that you can use to identify different types of content. But I really love. I'm a copywriter. Like I really like copywriting. I think that it's a very powerful skill set in digital because like every touch point has some language on it usually, or some words associated. So I love Copy Blogger. I love basically anything by Dan Kennedy or Frank Kern or any of these kind of like direct response copywriters. And mostly what I do, honestly, when I'm reading, like, I read very carefully almost everything that Google, Facebook, LinkedIn publish. Not everything, but like I like to read their documentation because there's like hints and clues that like they don't say things necessarily outright all the time, but I really like to examine and study. So like when I'm practicing and I get punched in the nose with something, like if it's Google ads related, I always look for Google's own advice on the topic, and then I kind of interpret it knowing that Google lies sometimes. So those are my go-to things. I think it's a good question to ask because I think it's a powerful and valuable habit, especially for marketers.
Yeah, and just in life in general, right?
Yeah.
To read up on things, and even Chris, what you were speaking about, like just Googling, right? Googling, and also like I'm on Reddit a lot, obviously, just see weird things, what's out there. People live very different lives, and so it's just, I think it is a good habit, like you said, Chris, just to kind of be a lifelong learner and anything that you go to do, not just marketing, but just in general. So thank you. I appreciate that. That was a wealth of information. So thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'm interested to hear from the rest of the group. What do you guys read? Or do you have any go-tos? What's in your bookmark bar? PJ, I know you're a reader.
Yeah. So in terms of books, there's a thread on Twitter that had a bunch of good recommendations. I'd read about half of them, but there were 3 that I picked up this morning specifically. The new role that I'm in, actually one of their perks is an unlimited book budget. So I started taking advantage of that this morning. It's Naval. It's called The Almanac of Naval, which is a book about Naval Ravikant. The other one is High Impact Management, I think is the name of the title. It's by Andy Grove. And then the third one was called Smart Cuts, which all look super intriguing. I don't have any reviews on those yet, but the ones that I recommended were like Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That's always a go-to. There's Influence by David Cialdini. What's his first name?
Robert. Yeah.
Robert Cialdini. There's a whole bunch I have, but that's in terms of books. I think that those are great. Books are always kind of super critical. In terms of like influencers, I guess for lack of a better word, Dave Gerhardt's great. I'm more in the kind of B2C space just generally, and so I find that the advice is definitely more B2B focused. Just obviously a very different paradigm of marketing. So kind of depending on which kind of avenue you're in, you'll find more or less value in that way. I would second also the LinkedIn thing. I find a lot of influencers through LinkedIn and get access to like blogs and stuff, from LinkedIn. There's a lot of great influencers, and it's so funny. The world is so small. Like there's this one guy who's like a VC, investor creator guy who's named Sahil Bloom, and I've seen him pop up a ton of times. And then, through this new role I'm in, we're huge on Twitter, and he had like asked a question about newsletters, which is the business we're in, and I just like saw this guy now on Twitter, and so I have always wondered. That's happened all the time, where it's like you see somebody on one platform, and then it's just like you see him on another platform that's seemingly unrelated, and the world just feels very small. And as you start following people, I find that happens more often, and I don't know whether that's just the algorithms get really, really good, or these people are just like getting huge followings, but it's a little bit creepy sometimes.
Yeah, it's your reticular activation system in your brain.
That's true. Yeah. Also, just like picking up on the patterns.
It's like the moment that you're in the market for a certain type of car, you just start seeing them everywhere. You're like,
Tesla's
whoa.
everywhere.
Hey, one other thing that you just brought up, or that you just reminded me of, EJ, is the social media algorithms are very, very powerful for both good and bad. So my lady, for whatever reason, likes sad stories that involve kids. It's like a passion of hers. Like she says, hey, when I grow up, I want to help kids that are like in trouble. So she goes and spends a lot of time reading like news articles about this kid was kidnapped or the parents were arrested because of this. And she's like, oh my God. And she gets all passionate about it. But when you look at her Insta feed now, it's just like everywhere. So I'm like, babe, you gotta like take control of that algorithm. Like it just makes you sad every time you go on Insta. But something that you can do on Twitter, LinkedIn, even YouTube is just be real specific about the types of stuff that you watch. Not that you can never watch anything for fun, but as you start watching more and more, the algorithm is going to surface the best content of that type. That's the
Yep.
goal. So I remember when I became obsessed with Facebook ads, probably like 2016, 2017. I spent like hours consecutively, like on the weekends, just in this private Facebook group, which was all about Facebook ads. And I connected with a bunch of people. I was just in there for like 12 hours, and I basically got a master's degree in Facebook ads. But still to this day, like Facebook now understands that I'm a marketer. And so I don't see like fake news stuff that much. I limit the number of people that I personally follow just because like I don't want necessarily to get updates on everything. And then so when I go to my feed on and LinkedIn to a large extent too, it's like really useful stuff that comes up there. I also like finding like really influential kind of badass experts at something. And especially if they're on Twitter following just a small number of people, like if they have like 50,000 followers and they're only following like 12 people, I'm always really, really curious about who those 12 people are. And you can find a lot of, a lot of good follows that way.
Yeah. One thing I'll say on the opposite end is, often a lot of the people that are the most valuable to learn from are not always the ones with the biggest social followings, right? Or that have the most likes or engagements, right? If you think about like, the CEO of Shopify, when he goes on, a podcast or something like that, you compare the views that he gets to Gary Vee, right? It's an easy example. Gary Vaynerchuk, and it's night and day, right? But the CEO of Shopify has a very different kind of trajectory than Gary Vee, and he's, obviously very successful financially. So depending upon your goals, it can make sense to look for those people that maybe don't have the biggest followings, but through understanding the space, that they're worth learning from, right? And going and seeking those people out, even though they don't have the views of somebody who's more on the influencer side of the spectrum.
Wow.
Thank you all. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
like people like us, Jarrett. We publish fire. We publish fire on LinkedIn. Nobody follows us.
Not yet. Not yet.
All right. Well, I see we got a couple of chats in here in queue.
Yeah.
Yep. Twitter has, or EJ shared the Twitter link for. Oh yeah, never split the difference. That's a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So what else? We got 14 more minutes.
Mhm.
I'm just about done with lunch.
So is there something that came up in the marketing world that you guys have a question about, or something you saw on LinkedIn, or maybe there's something you're curious about testing?
I actually do have a question, or kind of to maybe get your perspective on things. One of the things that I've seen over the past like year and a half with kind of the introduction of all of the privacy tools is kind of a degradation of attribution and all things remaining the same, performance across mostly Facebook, just because it's such a huge platform that so many people use. But at the same time, have also seen like a huge opportunity in that it's kind of weeding out a lot of like the not so good marketers who are just relying on the algorithm. Because back in the day, I'm sure you guys remember, you could just plug in an audience and you would just get sales, basically. Regardless of kind of the quality of the creative. And so the kind of silver lining to that has worked is that like investing in kind of high quality creative and understanding kind of the basics of marketing, understanding your audience, understanding the positioning, understanding the messaging has almost become like a superpower in that space because you're able to actually do marketing. It kind of sounds funny, to put it like that, but have you guys experienced something similar? And would love to hear kind of what you guys are doing kind of in the creative space. I know there's like that very talented creative team over there. Have you guys seen similar? I'm sure you guys have seen similar issues with the attribution, but have you approached those problems in a similar way by basically reinvesting in creative in kind of the traditional aspects of marketing?
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, it is one of the reasons we've doubled down on our creative team is because having really strong creative is the difference maker. Is one of the big difference makers now, especially on Facebook. There's actually a episode of our podcast, Chris hosts, 3-Minute Marketing, coming out very soon, with a guest, Alex Montas. He's VP of Marketing at TubeBuddy, where he talks about this challenge where the Facebook issue, the iOS 14 thing happened, and creative was the solution. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be coming out soon. He has an interesting insights in how they kind of pivoted and doubled down on creative through that process. But yeah, a couple of things I'd say. One is, back to Chris's point earlier, creative is now the thing that allows people to raise their hands, right? So by identifying what creative is compelling, both in the ad feed, right, the ad creative, and the experience on the site, the digital experience you drive people to, you can figure out what engages people. That data is now more critical than ever, right? Yeah, being able to use creative in a way that gets people out of the newsfeed and actually gets them to stop scrolling or in moving their thumb and engage is key, right? And then the other thing I'd say is that Chris, you may have more insight here, but really the velocity of testing creatives is a lot higher than it used to be, right? It used to be you could run a few creatives and one of them would work and you could just crank up the budget. Now it's really about testing those different angles, testing those different offers, and really finding what sticks. But then continuing that testing velocity, right? It's you have to put a lot more investment into your creative now than you used to, when you could just send it off to the algorithm and let it fly. Chris, is there anything you would add to that?
Yes. So we experienced, many of our clients were affected by iOS 14, but none more so than Amazon, because we spend the most probably with them.
Yeah.
So we basically got a PhD in like mitigating iOS 14 over the last year, and there's no silver bullet for it, but the general consensus is yes. Like creative's always been powerful. There's always been, I think, good marketers that got it, and but it's now beyond powerful. It's now like critical that you have it and that it's good. There's other mitigations around it. Like I find more and more often we're looking at attribution as like a lens more so than a rule. So like we'll sometimes toggle between different attributes, because like with iOS 14 it also really shortened the look back window for conversions. So like we'll look at attribution more frequently from different views. So we'll look at first touch, then we'll look at last touch, then we'll look at blended or data driven. And I think that it's becoming more acceptable and understood, even like among non-technical executives. But really the thing that's kind of frustrating in larger organizations is that nobody can actually tell one way or the other, like if performance is down. If you're smaller, and you're dealing in like the dozens of leads or the hundreds of leads, it's a lot easier to isolate things and to like literally look at the data and count the names and see. whether things are actually being harmed or not. Because as far as I can tell, you know, like clients certainly freak out about it because they see their reports look worse, right? But I, for the life of me, have not been able to answer the question of like, is performance actually down overall? You know, because like a lot of times you'll see, you know, Facebook or a paid social channel fall off in line with another one taking off, you know, where the net aggregate is like, doesn't appear as bad as it might look in Facebook, but there's just so much data that you can't really like get to the bottom of it. So I think in that case, you know, being small is an asset there, because you can get closer to figuring out like, is this actually an issue? Like, am I actually constricted in reach? Is it actually more expensive to acquire leads and customers? Or is it just that my reports look worse because the look back window changed from 30-day to 7-day? What we're doing creative wise, so we do test at a faster velocity overall, but we do so in themes, or you might even call them concepts, whatever it is. But we'll create two very different looking concepts. Like one might be about saving money versus the other might be about like a totally different benefit or you know, element of the offer. So we'll test, you know, those two things against each other, which are very different things, and then one of them will win, and then we'll create a whole bunch of versions of that winner and go back along and create and come up with a new challenger concept that's like way different than the winner. It's important to have to test like big differences, you know, like I like there was a time where we would come up with one or two concepts and automatically build out, you know, the different variations. So you end up having like 10 or 20 ads in the account, but you're not really spending that much, and you can't really like, you're not getting significant spend behind any really of the ads. So I like to start with two very, very different things, identify a winner, and then build out a few variations of that winner as you create a third like challenger concept. What we're seeing, well, so on Facebook and TikTok really has kind of pioneered or popularized this, is what I call the influencer style ad. That's what we call them here, influencer style ads. But the concept of influencer style ads, and I can show you an example here briefly. Let me just close my door. But the concept of these is that they don't look like ads. They're not highly produced. Generally, they're video, almost always they're video. Usually they're like selfie shot, but they paint the picture of the dream. You know, they show what the promise is. They also generally include a comparison, like either before or after. They generally include a small amount of like education, you know, like educating the user about the thing, but then they always show the post-click experience, like on the cell phone selfie. It like shows the landing page, and it's like, go here, guys, and it shows the person like scrolling through the field, which is we call it scent trail, meaning like, does the landing page smell like the ad? Because that's, you know, subconsciously, if there's a big disconnect between how the ad looks or what it says and what they find on the landing page, then you're almost certain to have a bounce. Let me see. Jared, will you let me share my screen or no?
Let me see if I can do that. This is good news for marketers, right? Because you know, instead of having to have these big budgets for creative, you know, you can, you know, with a relatively low budget, get something out in the market that can perform way better than a highly produced asset, right? So, you know, it shows that it's not just about like how much investment you put into the creative, but, you know, focusing on what's going to resonate with your audience and going back to marketing principles. It frees us as marketers to be more creative, even if our budget is constrained.
You guys want to see this real quick?
Let's do it.
Can you can hear me?
Yep.
So See you, much,
Hey guys, I gotta jump, but this has been fantastic. I appreciate it, and you guys keep on keeping on. Love seeing you
Cool.
guys.
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks, CJ. You rock.
Thank you, Jay.
Bye.
Appreciate the questions, man.
Of course.
What's something you learned that you feel like should be illegal?
I heard back from them and I basically just recovered almost $600 on my car insurance, basically just because I'm a safe driver. So this is a new program and they're giving out special incentives to be a safe driver. So if you don't have tickets for a certain amount of time, if you don't drink and drive, the basic stuff, you can recover money on your auto insurance. So in my personal situation, I was able to recover almost $600 because I personally haven't gotten a ticket in almost 3 years. And it's a new program, so not everybody knows about this, but the people that do, they're giving out more now because it's new. So if you're a safe driver, you don't do crazy stuff on the road, and as a result, you might not have gotten tickets. You could easily recover money on your auto insurance. So check out this site. It's basically like a quiz, and once you go through the questions, it'll show you the different options for your savings. So check it out. There's a link in this video.
See how it like set the expectations for like what happens after you click. Now, I showed this to a podcast guest yesterday, just the same way that I showed it to you guys. And he's like this big shot CMO guy. And I was like almost embarrassed because of the look on his face as he was watching. He was like almost appalled, like this is an ad. Because it doesn't seem like it would be a good ad, but this ad pulls long form leads, meaning it's not just like a name and email. There's like 12 fields, including a vehicle identification number, which is a hard field to submit for like less than $15 a lead. 1.5. So yeah, it's doing really well, I guess, despite being ugly and native looking. Now I know. I see Sasha looking at me because she's like, I know you guys, you're in a, very white collar, like B2B setting. So you can't do something like that. Like it'll never get approved or fly, but maybe there's some other, maybe there's some variation or some
Different.
twist.
I'll give you that. I think that's what my question earlier. I know we're running out of time, but one thing is like, I'm working on, we're like everyone else, what can we do different, right? Grabs attention. So different, but I can see a variation. I think that's cool.
Yeah. I don't have any brilliant ideas for with him right off the top of my head, but I was about to say, you think you get the CEO to do a selfie video?
I do the videos though, so you never know. Yeah, we definitely love that. Our culture videos are one of a kind, so there's hope.
Nice.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.